Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing incredibly well. Loads and loads of love to each and every one of you. And I hope you're going to get a lovely hot drink, whether it's cocoa or coffee or tea, or perhaps a lovely glass of wine like red or white, or some cold lemonade, because I've got a fabulous story for you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Jackie blamed herself. Who was there else to blame? She knew her husband Bernie also laid the blame at her door, although he'd never said as much in so many words. But she had clearly seen the melancholia on his face, and that accusing look in his eyes that had said clandestine words that were never spoken out loud or articulated, but she knew them nevertheless.
How could you have let it happen, Jackie?
She didn't know the answer to that question, because some questions cannot be answered. She had just gone into the house for a couple of minutes. Yes, she'd been waylaid for a little longer than anticipated, but she could never have envisaged something so terrible would happen while she left the patio for just a short amount of time. And this little trip into the house, she had no way of knowing, would serve to cruelly shatter her world into a zillion pieces. She had gone off to her bedroom to get her daughter's armbands that she had purchased the week prior, and would be rather useful as a tool to help her 3-year-old become more acquainted with the water in the pool. She was going to get her daughter in the pool and give her a swimming lesson. Didn't they say you should start teaching your children very young to swim, as young as possible? There was no time like the present as far as Jackie was concerned. Jackie's own mother had put her into the swimming pool when she was only 6 months old. She had bobbed Jackie up and down in her arms in the water, so that from a very early age Jackie had grown to love the swimming pool, and she wanted the same for her little girl. It had been such a beautiful prepossessing day, one of the most magnificent days that Jackie could actually remember, until its beauty was vindictively expunged by the horror that was ultimately to come. This was a day when the weather teased you, like an old friend, reminding you of how wonderful it was to spend time out of doors, enjoying the extravagant generosities that the natural world had to offer, from the prepossessing views to the warm feelings of the sunlight spilling on your face. It was so absolutely perfect. No one could believe such perfection could be obliterated in a single instant. The water in the pool persuasively enticed you to take a dip, which is exactly what Jackie Peterson intended to do, as swimming for her was always a passion, and it was the way she kept her trim body in perfect shape. She had been sitting on the sun lounger, soaking up all the warm sunshine like a salamander, while reading a book and drinking a glass of refreshing homemade iced tea that tasted of peaches. On the patio floor, her 3-year-old daughter Lily had been seated on a comfortable rug, playing with her favourite doll. Her plump little legs were spread out on the floor of the patio, next to her mother's sun lounger, and she was chatting away happily to her doll, as children of her age so often do. The modern patio overlooked the swimming pool, and the water in the reflectant light seemed almost turquoise, glistening in the morning sun. Jackie finally rose to her feet, feeling a sudden, rather impulsive urge to go for a swim. On such a perfect day as this, she should make the most of such enjoyable indulgences, she thought. She gingerly placed the novel she was reading down on the sun lounger, marking the page very carefully with a bookmarker. She then casually slipped into her Diamante-style flip-flops that were lying on the floor next to the sun lounger, where little Lily was playing with her doll. Jackie looked very elegant, in a full leopard print swimming costume that brought out the honey colour of her flawless skin. During the course of her life, she had only ever worn full bathing suits. She absolutely abhorred bikinis. She thought they made you look as if you were wearing your underwear. She trotted down the patio steps and opened the gate to the swimming pool. It creaked as it swung open, which was rather absurd, as the swimming pool fence and the gate had only been recently erected, 12 months before or so, and had recently also been oiled by her husband. The fence had of course been put up to protect their 3-year-old daughter Lily from going into the pool area, because at such a young, tender age, accidents can so easily happen. Jackie would have given her life to ensure that 3-year-old Lily came to no harm. She knew that pool fences had saved many young children's lives in the past, and she had wanted to make sure no harm befell her beloved daughter. She bent over rather cautiously, plunging her fingers into the water to test the temperature. She withdrew her hand and smiled, as the water, like this magnificent day, was absolutely perfect. She was sure that when she walked out of the swimming pool gate to return to the patio, that the gate had spontaneously closed behind her, as it always did, for she was sure she'd heard the click. It had been her dream to live in a beautiful house like this, with a modern, very large swimming pool in the heart of the Georgian countryside. Jackie had lived in Portland all her life, but after her husband Bernie made a lot of money out of stocks and shares, the couple could afford to upgrade their standard of living and move to the countryside, whereupon they had built their dream home, along with a swimming pool on a sizable plot of land. And what could be better than that? When Jackie's dream to live on a property as idyllic as this had come into fruition, she absolutely believed she was unequivocally the luckiest woman in the entire world to live out her dream, and she knew if it wasn't for her husband Bernie and his savvy aptitude for many of his wise investments, that the dream that she had would never have been realized, for the couple had struggled financially for many years, and Bernie had remained optimistic that his investments would come through for them in the end, and of course they had. Jackie had always been a keen swimmer. Indeed, when she was at school, she had been one of the best swimmers in her year, beating many of the school records, and she was so good and so accomplished she could have easily trained for the Olympics. But Jackie had shunned such a challenge. As much as she adored swimming, she had never been keen of spending countless hours in the swimming pool, working herself to the bone, to achieve those impossible goals. Jackie didn't consider herself to be ambitious, nor was she overly competitive. She didn't want swimming to become a chore for her, but to remain the pleasure it had always been in her life. So most days Jackie would make sure she enjoyed an invigorating swim in the pool. But many of the days the weather had been not as obliging as it was today. Ostensibly for years, it would seem, in order to practice her favourite sport, she had braced the rather unfortunate inconveniences of public indoor swimming pools, which she shared with a host of other people. So she'd never had any privacy during her swimming sessions, but she had enjoyed them none the less. Even her own parents had called her a water baby, as she had loved luxuriating in long hot baths, and as a child her mother had struggled to get her out of the bath, for she always wanted to play with her plastic ducks. Jackie's brother, on the other hand, Wayne, had hated bathing, and would be dragged kicking and screaming to have a bath by his mother. But Jackie could have stayed in that bath water forever, if that were at all possible. She had loved going swimming and paddling, and had thoroughly enjoyed water sports of every kind. The first thing Jackie Peterson had decided to do, when she and her husband had bought this piece of land, was to bulldoze the original property and replace it with their dream home. Jackie had judiciously designed the house, with the expert guidance and help of a very skilled avant-garde architect by the name of Philip Macaulay. It was Philip who had warned Jackie to get a swimming pool gate and complementary fence erected around the newly built pool. "I know a fence around the pool can be quite unsightly," he told her, "but you can soften the look by growing pretty vines around it. But you can't be too careful when it comes to young ones. And you do have a little girl. Let's just say a fence around the pool will give you the peace of mind that every parent desperately needs when their young ones are running around. I know of people who couldn't bear the idea of putting up a fence around their swimming pool. They thought it would be an eyesore, and lo and behold, the very worst thing happened. They lost one of their children to a very tragic drowning accident, and as a consequence, never forgave themselves for putting the ugliness of a pool fence over the safety of their own children. With our best intentions, sometimes we'll have our eye off our children for a moment, and that's when accidents can so easily happen. I really wouldn't want that happening to you, Jackie." "Thanks for the advice, Philip," Jackie had said. "I know having a pool fence will likely be an eyesore, but I don't care a jot about that. We definitely need a fence around the swimming pool. I couldn't imagine anything worse than losing little Lily. The very idea is too horrendous to even entertain. I'll grow climbing roses around the pool fence to make it look as attractive as possible." And that is exactly what Jackie had done, so that the pool fence was a tumble of pretty roses, and didn't look even half as bad as Jackie thought it would, as roses can easily turn the most ugly eyesore into an object of great beauty. On this sunny afternoon, Jackie needed to go indoors, just for a brief minute, but it only takes a minute to destroy your entire life. A minute when your attention is cruelly diverted, when your eyes are turned away. And it takes that pivotal second when, unbeknown to you, a tragedy can take place under your very watch that you knew nothing about, until, of course, it's all too late. After testing the temperature of the pool water, Jackie Lee happily sashayed over to the patio, where Lily was playing with her doll on the rug, and seemed fully engaged. Jackie bent down to lift up her 3-year-old daughter into her arms, shaking her slightly, in a teasing manner. Her heart melted with warmth as Lily's blue eyes stared into hers adoringly. Little did Jackie Peterson know that this would be the last loving embrace that she would ever have with her little girl. Lily was the cutest little 3-year-old girl that Jackie had ever seen, but of course every mother is inclined to be biased in that regard when it comes to their own children. But Lily was an adorable 3-year-old. She had the face of a cherub, those chubby cheeks that you love to pinch because they're so adorable, ringleted blonde curls that tumbled around her heart-shaped face, and she had eyes that were so blue. They reminded Jackie of cornflowers. When she walked, she waddled like a duck, which was really endearing, as she was still struggling a little with her gait. Lily began to chuckle with delight as she looked up at her mother adoringly. She was the kind of child that would never stop smiling. She was always in a happy, contented mood, and had never given Jackie any trouble. "You and I are going to have lots of fun today," Jackie told her daughter. "Mummy is going to teach you how to swim. Of course, I'm going to hold you up in the water, but that's where the first lessons start, you know. How about that? Won't that be nice? I was put in the water by my mother when I was 6 months old." Whether Lily understood what Jackie was saying, she wasn't sure. But she did smile up at Jackie, and she held her doll in her hands, clinging on to it like a hot water bottle. "Katie," she said, pointing at her doll. Katie likes the water." "Katie's not going to swim today," said Jackie, smiling warmly. "But you are, Lily. Isn't that exciting?" "Swim," said Lily, looking at her mother again. "That's right, Lily. You're going to have a swim. I'm going to get some armbands for you, and I'll prop you up in the water." "Swim," said Lily again, pointing to the water. "I'm going to make sure you have a swim," said Jackie, putting her daughter down on the patio floor. "Now you keep playing with Katie. I won't be 2 minutes. I'm going indoors for a brief second. You stay right where you are and be a good girl." As Jackie slipped through the sliding doors from the patio into the house, she briefly looked into the kitchen to see Kirsty hard at work, cleaning the granite surfaces of her avant-garde, perfectly designed kitchen, which would likely have impressed the likes of Gordon Ramsay, as it had a cutting-edge design and all the kitchen accessories you could ever need, along with the most superb bright red aga that had been imported all the way from England. And Jackie had always dreamed of owning an aga, as it warmed up the entire house, and especially the kitchen, in the cold months of the year, as it was permanently left on, and this was an oil-fired aga. Jackie briefly glanced into the kitchen to look in on 16-year-old Kirsty. She noticed the teenager was wearing those Bluetooth earphones on her ears, and was clearly listening to something on her cell phone that she liked very much, for she was bopping away very happily to the music as she worked, obliviously unaware that Jackie was watching her dance. Kirsty had been working for the Petersons, every afternoon after school, for a couple of hours or so, to earn a little extra money, and to help Jackie around the house where she could. Sometimes she even did a little babysitting for the Petersons, for she was very fond of their 3-year-old daughter Lily, and little Lily had rarely warmed to the 16-year-old. "Kirsty!" Jackie called out, waving her hand wildly in the air to get Kirsty's attention. Kirsty must have sensed Jackie's presence, because she suddenly looked up in Jackie's direction and apologetically removed her earphones from her ear and looked up at Jackie. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson?" she asked, standing to attention. "I just want you to know I'm going to the bedroom very quickly to look for some armbands for little Lily, and a towel, of course. Keep an eye on her, will you? She's on the patio right now, on the rug, playing with her doll Katie. I don't want her wandering off, as you know how curiously inquisitive she can be. I'm terrified of her going off into the woods." The kitchen overlooked the patio and the swimming pool, and Jackie wanted to make sure that Kirsty was watching over her daughter. But the 16-year-old girl, although obliging, appeared suddenly distracted, when her cell phone suddenly rang. "Oh, my God!" she cried out in delight, as she glanced down at the caller ID. "It's Ryan, Jackie!" She looked up at Jackie, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. Ryan was the new boy she'd been dating recently, whom she told Jackie was absolutely the one. "I'm going to spend my entire life with him, Jackie," she had told Jackie proudly, with an assertive determination that suggested there was no doubt in her mind about this. "I knew when I laid eyes on him for the first time that he was the boy for me. I'm going to marry him one day. I know he feels the same way about me." Jackie had laughed it off, for 16-year-old kids were notorious for being extremely immature, and they certainly didn't know what they wanted from life at such a young age, let alone who they would one day marry. Jackie stood there in the doorway of the kitchen, watching Kirsty take her call, and Jackie could tell Kirsty was smitten by this young man who called himself Ryan. But at 16 years old, she doubted the relationship would last even 10 minutes, if her teenage years were anything to go by, that is. Once the infatuation had invariably worn off, as it so often does with girls of Kirsty's age, she'd likely be swooning over another boy very soon. Kirsty looked at Jackie and nodded at her, as she walked over to the kitchen window. She waved at Jackie as if to say, "I've got this." Jackie discerned by Kirsty's body language that Kirsty was going to keep an eye on little Lily, so she could go off and get those armbands for her daughter and a towel to dry off with after the swim. Jackie wasn't overly concerned about little Lily's safety, as the pool gate was closed, but she was more worried about her daughter wandering off into the woods, which fringed the edge of their large lawn and stretched back over a sizable distance. Jackie had often seen Lily gazing off longingly towards the woods, with an unquenchable childlike intrigue and curiosity. Sometimes she'd wave ebulliently at the trees, giggling with delight, and Jackie would ask her what was funny and who she was waving at, and her daughter would once again chuckle and say, "The bear! The bear is waving at me!" Jackie hadn't seen any bears on the property, although in this more mountainous part of Georgia, bears weren't uncommon. Little Lily had a penchant for bears, and had dozens of fluffy bears all over her bedroom, distributed over bookshelves and everywhere else besides, all whom had their own special names. So Jackie was certain that little Lily would grow up to become a big animal lover one day, much like her father Bernie was. The family had 2 bulldogs, Sammy and Poppy, who were currently lying on the patio next to Lily, while the family cat, Tiger, was lying stretched out on the sun lounger, lapping up the sunshine very happily. He always occupied Bernie's sun lounger when the man wasn't around. Jackie dashed off to her bedroom to look for the armbands. She had quite the battle trying to find them, as she didn't remember where she'd put them. Where the hell were they, she thought. She searched through her wardrobe and had very little luck in finding the plastic bag containing the armbands she had recently purchased that had been especially designed for 3-year-olds. Where the hell were they? Finally she sighed with relief. She found them tucked away in her underwear drawer, and as to why they were there, she couldn't be sure. But all that mattered was at least she'd found them, and now she'd hold her 3-year-old up in the water and help her child learn to kick her back legs for the very first time. She smiled to herself contentedly. Life was very good. How happy she was that they had moved to the countryside. This was the best place to raise a young child, and a whole world away from her claustrophobic life in Portland, which had made her sometimes feel like she was living in a goldfish bowl. For everywhere you went there were people, and more people, like schools of fish that you could never avoid. And Jackie had always fancied the quiet life. She enjoyed socializing from time to time, but she also valued her space and independence. And out here she certainly got to enjoy that kind of freedom, a freedom she'd never appreciated before. She also enjoyed her regular shops in the small town, where the locals had warmed to her, gladly welcoming her to the community. She was so grateful her husband Bernie had been such a savvy investor, as they could still be counting their pennies now and struggling to pay their rent on time. But their fortunes had changed dramatically after the last couple of years, so the future looked very promising for them all. Jackie would now be able to give Lily the things she had never enjoyed as a child growing up, as her parents had struggled relentlessly to give her and her brother Wayne the things they badly needed. So much of their clothing was purchased from jumble sales and thrift stores, and growing up they'd lived on a diet of bread and jam and milk. So no one was more appreciative, in her change of fortune, than Jackie was. The Petersons had desperately wanted to have a child, but for some reason it had taken a long time for Jackie to actually fall pregnant. So when she finally did, the couple really did feel as if they'd hit the jackpot. So Lily became the Petersons' pride and joy, a gift from God, you could say. Well, that is what Jackie described her as, for she'd spent many a lonely night in her bed, before she fell pregnant, negotiating with God to have a baby, much like Hannah had done in the Bible, when she realized she was all but barren. Then it had happened just like it had happened for Hannah, and Jackie had fallen pregnant, and as a consequence she had never felt happier. She had loved her role as a stay-at-home mother. She felt absolutely no envy towards ambitious women who wanted to focus on their careers, for Jackie felt she didn't want to miss out on a moment of Lily's childhood. Jackie hurriedly grabbed a soft, fluffy swimming towel from the airing cupboard on her return journey back to the patio, where her daughter awaited her. She trotted down the passageway, glancing in on the kitchen briefly. She was annoyed to see that Kirsty was not looking out of the kitchen window to keep an eye on her daughter. On the contrary, Kirsty was walking up and down the kitchen, talking excitedly to her boyfriend Ryan, seemingly forgetting her duty of responsibility in looking out for little Lily. Jackie could hear Kirsty's conversation. "That's right! It does the best ice creams! We've got to go there together, Ryan. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. I spoke to the owner myself last week. He makes his own ice creams, you know. Can you believe that? He's invented so many incredible flavours. The guy's an absolute genius, let me tell you. He said if we've got any innovative ideas for new flavours, we've got to let him know about it. And if the flavour sells well, we can get to enjoy free ice creams the entire summer. Isn't that cool?" I know. No, I'm sorry. You can't like strawberry ice cream. That's a woman's choice. You should be liking peanut butter or pistachio. Those are much more masculine flavours. Yes, they are. Jackie was tempted to say something to Kirsty and give her a telling off for being so insouciant, but life was too short for that. Besides, it was such a prepossessingly beautiful day, and she didn't want to stain it with any unpleasantness by being snappy with a 16-year-old girl who was smitten by her new boyfriend. Jackie had been 16 once, and reminded herself how excited she had been when she started dating a new boy, so she didn't want to be too hard on Kirsty. By all accounts, Jackie was pretty sure she'd find Lily exactly where she left her, sitting there on the rug with the bulldogs at her side, playing very happily with her doll Katie. When Jackie casually strolled onto the porch, she looked towards where Lily should be playing with her doll, but the doll had been abandoned and was lying across the rug, while Lily was nowhere to be seen. Her 2 bulldogs were no longer sitting on the patio, but were standing over the swimming pool water, looking down on it, and barking almost manically. Jackie looked in their direction. She then saw something at the bottom of the pool, and she knew instinctively it was her daughter Lily. Jackie let out an ear-piercing scream that was so loud that Kirsty suddenly came charging out of the house, her eyes wide with horror. "What's happened? What's happened?" she cried out, looking out to see Jackie diving into the pool to retrieve her daughter's limp, unresponsive body that lay at the very bottom. Even before Jackie recovered her little girl, she knew her little girl was deceased. When the emergency services had arrived on the scene, they had done everything in their power to try and revive little Lily, who looked like a perfect porcelain doll lying on the side of the swimming pool. But everyone knew that the child was dead, and for a while no one said a word, as everyone hung their heads in sorrow. Once the EMTs had given up and had stopped working on little Lily's chest, Jackie took over. She was on top of her daughter, trying desperately to revive her with CPR, until the EMT gently pulled her away from her daughter and told her that it was all too late.
"I'm very sorry, ma'am,"
he said.
"I'm very, very sorry. Your daughter's gone. It's too late. She hasn't got a pulse or a heartbeat."
"No!" Jackie had screamed out. "No, she's not dead! Do something! She can't be dead!" Tears streamed down Jackie's face. "Do something! Don't just stand there!"
"Ma'am, please will you calm yourself down?"
the EMT said to her very gently.
"I'm afraid we've done all we can possibly do. We tried to revive your little girl, but there's nothing we can do. She's gone. We're very, very sorry."
Jackie had stared vacuously into space. Her face had become so white, her body shivering on this very warm summer's day. It was impossible to believe she could be cold on a summer's morning like this. But shock can make your temperature plummet dramatically, and someone, sensing this, had put a light blanket over Jackie because she was shivering so much. 2 police officers had arrived on the scene, as it was always important for them to investigate a death to ensure it wasn't suspicious. It was a female police officer that questioned Jackie. "What happened, ma'am?" she asked. "I don't know. Everything happened so quickly. I went inside to look for some armbands. I'd bought some armbands especially for a 3-year-old girl," Jackie told the police officer. "I thought the swimming pool gate was closed. I really did. Earlier on, I went to check the temperature of the water in the pool, and it was absolutely perfect, so I knew we could go swimming. I had no idea that the pool door had not closed behind me. I asked 16-year-old Kirsty over here to watch over little Lily, while I went indoors to get the armbands and a towel. Kirsty promised me she'd watch my daughter for me, because I was worried that Lily would go wandering off into the woods. But I didn't even know for a second the pool imposed a threat, because I didn't know that the gate had been left open. I was sure I'd heard it click behind me. Oh, my God! I can't believe I was this stupid. What's wrong with me? Why didn't I notice the pool gate was open? I didn't even realize it. This is all my fault. Why wasn't I more careful?" "Look, Mrs. Peterson," Jackie was told by the kind police officer, "you mustn't blame yourself for what has happened. It's devastating to lose a child. There is nothing worse, and I'm sincerely sorry for your loss. But don't blame yourself for this. Accidents do happen. I've seen it before, and it's nobody's fault." "No, they don't!" Jackie had cried out indignantly. "If I'd been more responsible as a mother, if I had double-checked that pool gate was closed, this accident would never have happened. And if Kirsty had done what I asked her to do, and watched my daughter from the kitchen window, instead of blabbing away to her boyfriend on the telephone, none of this would have happened." Kirsty had been standing there, shaking like a leaf, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's right," she told the policewoman, hanging her head in shame.
I promised Jackie that I would watch over Lily for her from the kitchen window. I got sidetracked. I got distracted. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry, Jackie. I'm so sorry.
You need to stop playing the blame game here, said the kind police officer. You can't point fingers at each other. It doesn't change the fact that Lily has gone. The police officer had gone into the kitchen and boiled a kettle. She had given both women warm cups of tea to calm down their nerves, because it would seem both Kirsty and Jackie were in quite the state. It was as if they were disconnected with what was going on, and Jackie was to say later that parts of that dreadful day had become like an ambiguous blur to her, as shock can so easily delete many of those memories, especially when they relate to a traumatic event. A while later, Jackie's husband Bernie had arrived on the scene. His face was devoid of all colour. His eyes looked like two blue marbles. When he saw his deceased daughter being placed on a gurney, with a sheet covering her body, he let out the kind of scream that still haunted Jackie's darkest nightmares to this very day. She'd never forget Bernie's scream, for he'd sounded more like an animal being attacked than a human being.
What did you do? Bernie had screamed at Jackie. You killed our little girl! You've killed our Lily! Why weren't you watching her, Jackie?
Jackie began to howl, and then Bernie had taken her lovingly into his arms and rocked her like a baby.
I'm sorry, love, to blame you. This isn't your fault. It was a dreadful, dreadful accident.
If Jackie was given $1 for every time someone had told her that, it was just a dreadful, dreadful accident, she'd be exceedingly wealthy by now. But Jackie felt that this was an accident that could easily have been avoided, if only she had been more vigilant as a mother. After the unfortunate tragedy, a question that Jackie asked herself over and over again, probably 1,000 times a day, was how had the pool gate been left open? She was certain she had closed it behind herself, but you could hark back to that day 1,000 times over, and it didn't change the fact that her very beautiful 3-year-old girl Lily would never be coming back, and one way or another it was all her fault. You could sugarcoat the truth as much as you liked, but the reality was brutal. Jackie knew she could never forgive herself for the tragic accident. Bernie had been supportive over the devastating loss of their daughter, but she did know underneath the complex layers of the calm, very composed veneer he presented to the world that her husband was not only devastated, but angry that Jackie had been so irresponsible by leaving the gate open, and that 16-year-old Kirsty, who had got carried away with a call from her boyfriend, had not realized the gravity of her distraction, and how it had almost certainly cost a little 3-year-old girl her life. Of course, Kirsty was devastated about Lily's death. Her eyes were red and puffy, as she apologized profusely to Jackie for what had happened.
I'm so sorry, Mrs. Peterson. I don't know what to say. You're absolutely right about everything. This is my fault. I should have been watching over little Lily. You asked me to do that, and I failed you. Yes, you should have,
Jackie had growled at her, her eyes filled with unbridled rage. For a moment she'd quite happily have strangled Kirsty. If she hadn't been on her call to her stupid boyfriend, Lily would very much still be alive.
I asked you to do this one thing for me, Kirsty, this one thing. Just watch over my little girl for a few minutes while I went looking for those armbands. I asked you specifically to watch over her,
she said accusingly, the bitterness in her voice very discernible.
But you were more interested in speaking to your boyfriend, Ryan. I hope you're happy now, because our little girl is dead because of you. She was only 3, Kirsty. How could you be so irresponsible? I know I should have closed the door behind me of the swimming pool. But you also have a responsibility here, because I specifically asked you to watch over her. I know, Mrs. Peterson. I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do... There's nothing you can do, Kirsty. Nothing. My husband will pay you your wages, and I never want you to come back to this house ever again. Do you understand? I can't trust you in my home any more. You've ruined our lives. I hope you're proud of yourself."
Kirsty had nodded her head in submission and walked away very sadly. And as far as Jackie was concerned, she hoped she'd never lay eyes on Kirsty ever again. It was the day after Lily's death that Jackie had casually walked over to the swimming pool to stare out at the scene again. That was when she found a collection of stones piled up together in a very curious way, and in the centre of this bizarre arrangement was a single pink flower. She wondered if possibly one of the EMTs had done this by way of saying farewell to her daughter, but she hadn't seen anybody arranging stones around the pool like this. But it was a sweet gesture, she had thought, thinking little of it, as people did have their bizarre ways of expressing grief. For the next 2 weeks her house had been filled with flower arrangements sent by well-wishers and many locals living in the town that had learnt the tragic news, all expressing their extreme sorrow to Jackie over her daughter's tragic passing. But no acts of kindness would ever take the dreadful hurt away for her. So there we are, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.